Hey, Husker fans, the trio is back together. Hello, everybody. This is the Pick Six Podcast. Sam McKewon along with Tom Shatel and Evan Bland off a week of vacation. Coming back just as the Nebraska baseball team is getting hot with incredible wins over the weekend in Charleston. Gentlemen, it's March. It's sunny out. It feels nice. We're moving into a new building. How you guys doing?
Good. Ready to get busy.
Yeah, man. March Madness. Let's do it.
And Nebraska is going to be a part of that March Madness, I think. Really good chance of that. Nebraska wins its final game at home on Sunday. The men I'm talking about, they're now 21-9 overall. They are in line for a potential double bye in the Big Ten tournament, and they went 18-1 at home. It was one heck of a season for Nebraska men's basketball at home. It's almost like pinch me good. The way that they played during Big Ten play, the two court stormings, all the things that they were able to do. For people who don't get a chance to go to PBA, either as a journalist like us or as a fan, and I've kind of gone a few times just to sit in the arena. Probably 6 times this year I was there just sitting in the arena. Tom, I mean, you've been to a bunch of the games here recently. You had mentioned that you felt like it was the best atmosphere that Nebraska basketball has had in the time that you've been covering the program. Especially on Sunday. A lot of fun. It's just one heck of a hard place to play. What did you think of PBA on Sunday and just over the course of the season?
Yeah, I thought it's the best crowd I've seen over a season. I consistently show up early, ready to go. And lately they've actually tried to get the team going when the team wasn't going. They tried to get them jump started, revved up. And they over the years, Nebraska crowds have never done that. They usually just sit on their hands and just kind of fret.
Yep.
This one doesn't do that, and I think it's the team. Sometimes the team and the crowd are almost like one, and they kind of play off each other. They feed off each other, and I think that's what you got here. And so yeah, it's a great year. I think that the difference in the home court is the crowd, but it's also the team is better. The team is able to go out and the I guess maybe the perfect example was the second half against Wisconsin. I think they were down 19, and once they hit a few threes and the crowd got into it, it was over, and you knew they were going to come back and win. So. Yeah, it's fun to watch, and the crowds have been there ever since they opened up in 2014. And some years they show up just because it's a great place to watch a game and hang out on. I was going to say on a Saturday. Usually it's a Sunday.
Right.
Big
It
Ten
is.
loves Sundays, but yeah, but yeah, it doesn't matter what time of the day or night or whatever. They're going to show up. So. It took Fred a while to get the kind of team that they were going to respond to, and that team wasn't a, a bunch of high ranked recruits who were going to throw up threes and not do the other stuff. These people respond to hard work and the little things, and team that doesn't quit. And No, that's the Nebraska football model, and it was, and I think that's going to come back. So maybe Memorial Stadium, in whatever form it turns into, will be the same way again.
PBA has really helped the team on defense. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. There have been I'm kind of counting it up right now, 6 Big Ten opponents out of the 10 that scored fewer than 70 points at PBA. And the last 4, Michigan, Rutgers, Minnesota, and Penn State, all scored fewer than 60. And so that PBA crowd has really altered the way that Nebraska plays defense at home. It is the difference, in my opinion, between Nebraska at home and Nebraska on the road. Nebraska on the road has scored at times. They've been able to score a little bit on the road, but defensively they have not been the same team on the road as they have been at home. So that's one thing that I think about. Tom, when you mentioned the kind of team that Fred has, and of course the blue collar stuff is real. You can see it in the way that, especially with the way Juwan Gary plays and some of these other guys. It's worth noting that quietly he's got a team that makes 3-pointers. They've got 6 guys that have made at least 25 3-pointers this year. They're shooting 36%. It's not vintage Fred. Iowa State had a team that shot like 41, but they're pretty good from 3. And quietly, they're shooting 76% at the line too.
Yeah, well, we expected the offensive skill when he was hired, but they've morphed into this other kind of team, but they can still score. At least this team can, and it's not just Casey. He's not. It's not just a one-trick pony. It's
Right.
a bunch of guys, and they still run these sets where guys break wide open under the basket, or he's got a rink mask out on top, and acting like the point center. He's got the ball over his head. He's looking for a pass. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for Fred. He can still run the offensive algorithms in his head,
Right.
but also have his guys that came out of the Sunday night. They came out of the gate playing really, really good defense. So it set the tone that way, and we'll always wonder. It was 2 years ago right now, where Trev Alberts, I think it came out on a radio show at night. He was going to keep Trev, or he's going to keep Fred, bring him back another year. We all thought Fred was gone, and but $18 million buyout, and Fred had a plan. What was that plan? Wouldn't we all love to know what that plan was? Was this the plan? And how do they know he's going to get these guys? These kind of transfers specifically. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I'd love to know what that plan was.
Yeah, I think Fred would say that the day that he got Sam Griesel was a turning point.
Yeah,
for the program.
Right.
And I honestly, I think Juwan Gary was a turning point. Now, Juwan has not been healthy for every single game. He's been out at times, but man, that guy, he's been hurt at times, but he's just been, I think, in a good way, a culture changer, a guy that everybody likes. And, I think Fred's ability to develop players has just kicked in. CJ Wilcher 2 years ago, not that great.
Yeah.
Shot 62.6% from the free throw line. CJ Wilcher in 2 years ago, 62.6. CJ Wilcher deserves credit for this, but he's shooting 94% at the free throw line now. That's pretty incredible.
For whatever reason, Sam, I think we're seeing Fred more involved. The first couple of years we heard that it was all Abdelnassa, and Fred didn't recruit. He didn't, he'd hear these things about practice where he'd show up and just kind of walk around. And I just get the feeling he's more engaged in the last couple of years, more involved. He was a hell of a coach at Iowa State. He was one of the hottest college coaches there was. Maybe he didn't fit in the NBA as a coach, maybe with the wrong team, whatever. But this is a reminder that this is who Nebraska hired. And it's he just needed to maybe re-engage himself and be smart enough to figure out what's going to work in the Big Ten. Still do his offense, still working magic with those transfers, and that's okay. But there he was last week in Omaha at a high school game. You don't see that very often, and there he was. So re-engaged. Re-engaged Fred. I like it.
So here's the question. Is Fred Hoiberg the Big Ten Coach of the Year in your opinion?
Yeah.
And is Fred Hoiberg going to win Big Ten Coach of the Year according to the media or the coaches? What do you think, Tom?
Well, I don't know. I would say vote after Sunday or vote Sunday night. The Big Ten Coach of the Year can't lose to Michigan in the last game with a double bye on the line. Okay,
Fair.
can't lose that game. If you win that game, I mean Matt Painter's got Zach Edey, but doesn't mean he's not a great coach. He's a hell of a coach. Illinois has been good, but they've had their bumps. Yeah, I think he's Coach of the Year. I do. If he's fourth. If you lose to Michigan and you drop down to that bye, then it's a little harder to do. But then I don't know who the coach. I guess it's probably Painter at that point, but I don't think it's Collins. Yeah, I mean he's picked 12th. If you can get in the double bye, I just think losing to Michigan is a bad look. So don't do that. But yeah, he takes him to the tournament. And I will remind people, I hate to be the bad guy on this, but I really do. I think they're in, but 6 years ago, had the double bye, 22 wins, and they weren't in. So we can all say they're in, but until St. Patrick's Day, when Husker fans are watching the selections at 5 o'clock Central, see your name pop up, that's when they're in. But I think they're in. But we're all kind of guessing.
Look at you planting that seed of doubt, Tom, that they might not be in. Like I felt like they've been off the bubble for a week or two.
I know. Well, I agree.
Resume.
And every year is different, Evan. It's just because it happened in 18 doesn't mean it's going to happen now. The bubble is weak this year. It's really soft. Nobody's making a big run. Iowa's kind of making a run right now, but they're way back. Nobody's making a run to really knock anybody off. They're all just kind of taking turns. You're in, you're out. Wake Forest, you're in, you're out. St. John's, Providence, in and out. So nobody's making a run. I think it's a different year. I think they'll be in. But yeah, that's my job to bring that up.
I think that's good. I want to hit on the Big Ten Coach of the Year thing and then get back to the NCAA tournament real quick. So from my perspective, there's 4 candidates for that job or for the award. Painter, Collins, who won it last year, Brad Underwood at Illinois, and Hoiberg. And the reason I mention Underwood is because Illinois has a chance to tie for the conference championship. If they need to beat Purdue tonight, and then they need to beat Iowa, and then Purdue needs to lose to Wisconsin. Not likely, but possible. And if they do that, Brad Underwood probably, hey, you tied for the conference championship, and you played at least some of those games without your best player. I think he might have a chance. Painter obviously has probably the best team. Collins has done a hell of a job. I mean, I'm perpetually impressed by what Northwestern does with far fewer resources than Nebraska. And then you have Hoiberg. And somebody, pointed out to me that Nebraska was picked in the preseason, I think 11th, 12th. If they finish 4th, like you said, Tom, I mean, that's pretty dang good because nobody thought they were going to be very good this year.
Right.
So I like him. Hoiberg's got a chance there. I don't know what his bonus structure is, but he might have a bonus attached to that. And then back to the NCAA tournament. I had this as one of our, prep notes for the podcast to ask this question. So Tom, you watch a lot of college basketball. You've seen some of these teams in person. I've seen all of them on TV. I watch every Creighton game. So I know who Creighton plays and all the rest. If you're talking about Nebraska compared to what I like to call the Big East 4, which is Villanova, Seton Hall, St. John's, and Providence. Those are the 4 teams that are all on the bubble in the Big East. Considering that league and considering Nebraska, it's an interesting comparison because some of those teams are going to make it. I don't know which ones, but some of those Big East teams are going to make it. The question I guess I'm asking you, because you've seen these games and these teams, you feel like Nebraska's who they are is favorable compared to those Big East four based on the conferences they're in and the wins they have?
Well, the Big East is better than the Big Ten. Certainly it's not. They don't have as many teams, but it's in terms of the strength of the league, it's better. And that said, some of the teams in the Big East at the bottom of the Big East aren't very good at all. But uh, the the top 7 or 8 I think are all better than and that goes up to I take UConn over #1 Purdue also.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Nebraska at home compares to all of them and is better on a given night. But Nebraska on the road is a Jekyll and Hyde bunch, and I don't know, and they played well on the road at times. They just didn't finish. The first half at Minnesota, the Illinois game, there are a couple others. They played, but they've also had Iowa clunker, Maryland. How in the world did they lose to Maryland? I mean, you watch Maryland now; they're not very good. How in the hell did Nebraska get blown out by Maryland? That baffles me. But so I just hope that it's the neutral site Huskers aren't the road Huskers. At least neutral site get the thing righted a little bit so you're going to be competitive. But it's interesting. There's some people out there that are thinking, well, if Nebraska goes to Omaha, which is a long shot, maybe. At this point, any of the sites are long shots, I guess, depending on the seed, which will probably be about a 10, I think, 9 or 10, But if they end up in Omaha, that there would somehow be like an asterisk if they win their first game with the home crowd.
Oh,
And I'm like going, I saw KU win a national championship in Kansas City with the home crowd. There was no asterisk on that national title. there's no on the banner in Allen Fieldhouse. There's no asterisk on that banner. The teams do this all the time. I've seen KU win regional games in Kansas City forever. UConn's going to play a regional in downtown Boston, which is whatever many minutes from Stores, Connecticut. You're going to see Purdue play in Indianapolis. I mean, these home crowd things happen all the time. So if Nebraska somehow gets to Omaha and they win, perfect. Home court doesn't matter; it still counts. So
yeah.
But to answer your question, I think that the Big East is better than the Big Ten, but Nebraska and certainly some of these other Big East teams on the road haven't been great either. But they certainly compare favorably, especially when they're home.
So I'll just rattle off the records. And I promise I'm not trying to piss Nebraska fans off here. I think all 4 of those teams, maybe not Providence, but the other 3, belong in the NCAA tournament. And I'll just rattle off the records. Providence is 7-11 in quad 1 and quad 2 games and 3-7 on the road. Seton Hall is 8-10 in quad 1 and quad 2 games and 5-6 on the road. Villanova is 10-9 in quad 1 and quad 2 games and 4-7 on the road. St. John's is 9-11 and 4-6 in road games. Nebraska's 7-9, so they played fewer, and they're 2-8 on the road. Now, if you just isolate that number right there, I think you can make the argument that all of those teams are more than qualified to be in the NCAA tournament and potentially even above Nebraska. Now, right now, if you look at projections, Providence is going to be the team that's left out. It has a crappy NET. I really don't know why, but they do. And then that other team you just mentioned, Hunter Salas is on it, Wake Forest. They're 7-12 in quad 1 and quad 2 games, right? Not great. And they're 2-9 on the road. And I think that's the team, if we're talking about teams, that Nebraska's probably ahead of. And then I'll be honest with you, everybody just assumes that Michigan State's a lock, and that's fine. Michigan State's 8-12 in the quad 1, quad 2, and they're 3-6 on the road. And so I think Nebraska's in, but Tom, I'm actually, I kind of go back and forth on this. I'm kind of with you that you better not lose Sunday and give anybody a thought.
Well, yeah, the last 8 days, 7 or 8 days, or including those conference tournaments. Now, the conference tournaments, usually the committee will meet starting next Wednesday night in Indianapolis. And
Next Wednesday. Okay.
yeah, next Wednesday. A week from today, they'll arrive and like Tuesday night, and then we'll start on Wednesday, and they'll go through all the teams, and they'll start separating who's in, who's out. And well, that takes place during the conference tournaments, and they've got TV sets every game on in their suite. But that field is down to the 68 by Friday night. Because it takes all day Saturday to get everybody seated. It takes every minute of Saturday to get that done. That's the hardest part of the whole thing. So what is a conference tournament? Does it matter? It matters a little, but again, a lot of that stuff's done Friday night. You don't see many Saturday night teams. Usually the teams that play Saturday night in the Big East or the ACC final or Big 12 are usually already in, so it's just a seed deal. Anyway, Sam, I think they, you don't want to. I thought they couldn't lose at home to Rutgers. That's the unforgivable sin. You don't do that. So I think they're fine. Just a matter of seeding. I mean, to me, it's an eyeball test. I've seen Providence and Seton Hall. Seton Hall didn't look very good at Creighton last
No, they
week.
didn't.
I mean, they don't look very good sometimes. I don't know why they're all the way in. I mean, and they beat Marquette earlier, and I guess they beat UConn, but
Yeah.
certainly those are going to help them. But St. John's can look good, and St. John's can look, not so good. So, and Villanova hasn't really been good all year. They won at Creighton, but that's one that not many people have.
They don't. I would not want to play Villanova in the tournament, but you're right. Not every bracket has Villanova in it. That's
again, it comes down to this. And, these guys all have a giant laptop in front of them. And they've got all the analytics, all this stuff. But they put 5 names on the screen and they say pick 3. And then they put 3 names on the screen and they say pick 2. And they put 2 and you pick 1. And they're not looking at the net when they do that. They have an opinion formed in their head,
right.
Having watched these teams on TV,
right,
and maybe live. Some of them are supposed to go to games. These ADs and officials are supposed to go to games and see them live too. So I think it just comes down to eyeball test and the opinion. Who's an NCAA tournament team? Who belongs? Who's not going to embarrass us? You don't want to pick somebody that's going to go in and look like crap. You want somebody that's going to compete and play well, and be one of the best teams in the country. So that's an opinion. That's not an analytic. That's an opinion.
Yep, it's going to be fascinating to watch an NCAA tournament where the Big East and the Big Ten have the same number of teams as the Mountain West, and see how the Mountain West teams do.
Yeah.
To me, it's just going to be really interesting to seriously assess Boise State and Villanova as in the same category of teams. I just don't think they are, and I guess we'll find out if I'm wrong about that or not. I would put 7 in the Big East in, but we'll see what they do. And in the Big Ten, I think it's gonna be 6 for sure, and maybe 7 if Iowa makes a run. Let's move to Nebraska women's basketball really quickly. The Husker women play on Thursday. They play Northwest, the winner of the Northwestern Purdue game. Here in about 5 minutes, I don't know, whenever we're recording this, I think you're going to get awards that come out. Natalie Potts will probably be freshman of the year. Kudos to Natalie. And then, Alexis Markowski will probably be first team All Big Ten. They play, yes, Thursday. I think they'll win that game. There'll be a little bit of pressure on them, I think, to make sure they win it, get to 20, firm up the NCAA tournament bid. And then they play Friday against a team that they don't care for at all in Michigan State. I think they can win that game. I don't think they're a good matchup for Michigan State, but the way that Nebraska tends to play against Michigan State, they play very hard. That's just been a game that Nebraska doesn't quite circle on the calendar, but they just care about it for various reasons. And so we'll see. Then on Saturday, they're going to play Ohio State. Ohio State will almost certainly be there if they make it to Saturday, and I don't think Nebraska will win that game. Ohio State and Iowa are battling for a number 1 seed. My anticipation is that only one of those teams will get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament and thus control of that bracket, which is important. And I think whoever wins the conference tournament, whether it's Iowa or Ohio State, is going to then be the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And that is a huge advantage, almost always a huge advantage in the women's tournament to be a number 1 seed, because it means you're playing your regionals very close to home. So we'll see what happens. Caitlin Clark's won 2 Big Ten tournaments. Won't surprise me if she wins a third. Won't surprise me one bit if she wins a third one in front of a giant Iowa partisan crowd. Ohio State will be playing on the road if they play Iowa on Sunday in the championship game. So it should be interesting to watch. Caitlin Clark obviously passing Pete Maravich on the all-time scoring list for men's or women's. Very different eras, very different players, both legends in their own way. Okay, baseball. So Nebraska baseball. I mean, Evan, I was watching and listening to the game. I don't know what to say. I think you were paying pretty close attention too, even though you're on vacation, right?
Yeah, I was following along. We're doing the stat broadcast thing a little bit.
And they must have felt 9 miles high after that 3-game series, because it's one thing to win games by a bunch of runs, and yeah, maybe that team's not very good, but I think Charleston's pretty good. And to compete and to win the same way 3 times in a row with late 9th inning rallies, that must be just a confidence booster, right?
Yeah, it's living dangerously. You don't want to do that every weekend, but like in baseball, I think it was Dusty Baker who said this once, like the worst teams in baseball still win a third of their games. The best teams in baseball still lose a third of their games. It's what you do with that middle third that really defines how you do. And that happens on days when not everything's coming together, when maybe you don't have the best day defensively, or you're not hitting well or whatever. And this weekend kind of felt like that for Nebraska. Like they didn't have a stellar defensive weekend. They hit 1 home run combined in the 3-game series. They were okay with their clutch hitting, and their starters were pretty good. But they found a way in all 3 games to win. And like those are games that Nebraska hasn't won the last couple of years. You're down in the 9th, you go quietly, and that's the end of it. So I thought that was interesting. And like the Sunday game, they're down 2-0 in whatever, the 3rd or the 4th inning. And I just kind of was like, I think they're gonna win this game. Like they're gonna wear down the starter, they're gonna chip away, they're gonna get a run here and there, bunt somebody over, bring them in, and they're probably going to win. Like that was just kind of like with Nebraska basketball and Rutgers. It was like, they're gonna win, even when they got down to 6. And so I think that's part of the sign too of just like a team that's going to figure it out. They know who they are. They haven't panicked. And now they're 7-3 coming home. And I'm going to write about this week, but there are only 3 cases in kind of the modern era where Nebraska's come home with a better winning percentage than they have. Those other 3 times that they did it, they hosted regionals every single year. So when Nebraska struggles, they lose these games, they fall into an RPI hole. and it's hard to dig out in the Big Ten. And right now, as we're talking, they're number 3 in the RPI. And yeah, it's way early.
I know, it's
And
great.
it's way early. It's going to fluctuate a ton. But this is the other thing. A year ago at this time, they were top 10, 20 in the RPI. And then they came home and played a bunch of scrubs, quite honestly, and their RPI plummeted. And you look at what they've got coming up. You got South Alabama that's 10-2. They're a top 70 RPI team right now. Wichita State 7-3. That's a top 70 RPI team. Nichols, which comes to Lincoln in a week, is 10-2. So like Nebraska has done a really good job, and some of it is kind of luck, but they've done a good job of identifying teams that maybe aren't power conference teams, but they're going to have good records, and thus that's going to help their RPI case. So we've written about it and talked about it before. They swapped out a couple of the Omaha games. They swapped out Northern Colorado, and they added in teams like Wichita State and Kansas. And so they're just in a really good spot from an RPI perspective. It seems like every year we talk about their February and maybe missed opportunities. And I think for the most part, they're in a really good spot, just setting that early resume as they come home for the first time.
One of the things that I think is very true of college baseball and maybe isn't quite as true of the major leagues is that the anti-Moneyball sort of small ball approach in college baseball tends to work because college baseball defenders just aren't as good as they're not even close to as good as major league infielders. And so one thing that I noticed is Nebraska has 6 home runs through 10 games, just 6. And maybe they're playing in big parks, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, that's low compared to where they were last year. And I think they have 13 sacrifice hits. So they've changed their entire identity in the offseason, right? Like they're laying down a bunch of bunts. I think they're trying to force defenses to make plays, right?
Absolutely. And Will Bolt would tell you that. Like that's their strategy is like under Erstad, for example, he took the major league approach. Like, let's play for the big inning. If you can score 3 or more runs in a frame, like the odds that you win are pretty high. Will Bolt has, especially this year, now that Bryce Matthews and Max Anderson have moved on, has taken the approach that you're describing, where college baseball, oftentimes it's about who screws up less than it is about who makes a great play, and that applies to the pitching side too, right? Like that's why Rob Childress in Nebraska say like their number 1 edict on the mound is to lead the Big Ten in fewest walks allowed per 9 innings. Like don't give it away, make them earn it. And so, yeah, I think that's sort of the same thing offensively. Like the strikeouts are still a little bit high, and I think that's part of the reason that they're sacrificing too, is they're saying, look, at the very least, let's put the ball in play and advance the runner and give ourselves a chance, as opposed to striking out and then you don't have anything and you're not going to hit the home run at the rate that you did a year ago too. So I think that's kind of Nebraska's approach, like minimize the mistakes, make the other team earn it, and then, rely on your bullpen, which is deeper than Nebraska. It appears to be deeper than what they've had in quite a while, and rely on the clutch hits, which have been a little bit below what they've done in the past. I think that still has room to improve moving forward too. But yeah, that's their approach. It's a very college baseball specific approach, and so far it's been working for them.
It has. I mean, it's college baseball specific for like 90% of the teams. Like LSU doesn't have to do that. They can just do whatever the hell they want. I don't know what their record is right now, by the way. Who's the number 1 team in the country?
Wake Forest or Arkansas.
Wake Forest, of course. Of course they are. Of course, Wake Forest is the number 1 team in the country. They're going to be back here, aren't they?
Probably. They have too much pitching not to be.
Yeah, that's good.
Little step back offensively, but yeah, too many good arms. And like I wrote preseason, I think Arkansas, maybe this is the year Dave Van Horn breaks through and they finally win one. They're looking really strong out of the gate too. But you're right. Like for the majority of the 300 Division I baseball teams, like you got to find a way. You're not going to load up on sluggers and live arms and that sort of thing. So you got to find an identity. And like to Nebraska's credit, like they found it. It's not, it's not what you're going to see maybe from the top of the SEC, but it's winning them games, and that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, Iowa flopped early.
They did. They had an opportunity.
Flop City.
The Big Ten has 0 ranked teams right now. Iowa had its chance and flopped. Indiana had its chance and it got knocked out. So the league's looking kind of open right now. I think, if you're talking about favorites, like it was Iowa and Indiana, I think clearly in the preseason, but I think Nebraska's making a little move, especially from a depth perspective, kind of
Pitching depth.
moving up a little bit there. Yeah, pitching depth and hitting. Honestly, they're hanging in there.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think they rolled out, I don't know, 7, 8 pitchers in that first game that they won 6-5. Rob Childress just isn't afraid. I feel like haven't we already seen his effect on the team? Like the ability of his willingness to trust a freshman like Ty Horn to go out and make pitches. Tucker Timmerman did the exact same thing. Like that's rare, right? Like he's able to instill these guys with a belief.
yeah, that's their whole thing is like whatever you throw it with conviction, and that does make a difference. So yeah, I mean those guys for sure. Uh, some of their transfers that have been in there have been really good. I thought Rand Sanders has been good. Casey Dice has been back. Kyle Perry, of course, who's been there forever, has sort of been the part-time closer to some positive effect as well. So, I mean, yeah, it's and like you wouldn't see such a quick hook if they didn't trust as many guys as they do, right? Like sometimes you have to ride your guy and like they're just not afraid after one out or two outs to play matchups or bring in somebody else. And Childress calls the pitches too, right? So like he's that's something he had a reputation for at Texas A&M and at Nebraska the first time was working 2 and 3 pitches ahead and scouting players well. And so I think you see kind of that adding into this thing too. So like now they're coming home, right? Like historically, Nebraska comes home and they're about a 500 team or a little below, and then they go on a run against kind of these overmatched opponents. It's a little bit different now. Like they have the winning record, and I think the opponents that they're playing, including South Alabama, are a little bit of a higher caliber than what we've seen in the non-con. So sort of a little bit of a different path or narrative for baseball at this point. I know it's still way early to be talking about postseason stuff, but like they're setting themselves up well because once you get into that Big Ten play, it's really hard to make up that ground, and so they just haven't given it away yet.
But we'll end on this. Big Ten Media Days has now been announced, July 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Nebraska is on day 2. And here's the lineup on day 2. I mean, this might be a day where it's like it's only the Nebraska reporters, right? Nebraska's on day 2, and you have Iowa, Michigan, USC, UCLA, and I think Wisconsin. I can't remember. But Tom, the day that Nebraska goes, you're going to have the two, what do you call it? The two, premier LA teams also talking. Nebraska's going to be one of the smaller stories, I think, in Indianapolis this year.
Yeah, and it's just gonna be us with Rule and Iowa guys with Ferentz and the Wisconsin guys with Fickle and everybody else, the national troop and the other Big Ten people will all be on USC. It had Chip Kelly stayed at UCLA, but I think UCLA will be a story, but Lincoln Riley in the Big Ten will just same with the last day with Dan Lanning. Oregon and USC are going to be the kind of the two curiosity stories that week. So yeah, we'll happily, of course, there'll be about 80 of us there. So we'll be around Rule and people will think it's Lincoln Riley, but it's just Matt Rule and it's just us. So but yeah, he'll what will the second year message be? Who will the anointed players be? We have plenty of time to, I guess, get that figured out.
Yeah, USC is the most interesting story of the 4 teams. Oregon's probably the best program, but Lincoln Riley and USC, the air raid and all that thing's about, and the Hollywood whatever in the Big Ten. I really do wonder how USC is going to do. I think Oregon's going to adjust, and they'll be probably pretty good right off the bat. But can USC be, what USC was 10 years ago? Can they be what they were 2 years ago? And Lincoln Riley, You know, he just doesn't strike you as a Big Ten coach, and yet here he is. He's in the Big Ten now, and he's going to have to, deal with, the weather and all the things you got to deal with in the league. So
Well, these are not Big Ten programs, so they're not Big Ten coaches. But Dan Lanning they won't have to adjust much. The people are going to have to adjust to Oregon, and that's because they already play physical. They can play any way you want to. They've got speed. The game of the year is going to be Ohio State, Michigan. I hate to break it to those people, but it's going to be Ohio State at Oregon, and that's like October, early to middle October.
Yep.
That's going to be the tiebreaker game. Going to come early, and that's the new Big Ten. And one in which maybe you could have Ohio State, Michigan early in the season. Why not? It's not the Big Ten anymore anyway. So, but Michigan will be a curiosity as well. But they lose so many players. New coach. I don't think expectations will be super high for them. They will be for Ohio State. Ryan Day will be under the microscope. He will be day one, I think.
He's day one, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, a different Big Ten, and than we've seen it. And apparently, there's some huge convention in town, or maybe the NBA Combine is there, or maybe there's an NFL Combine in July. It's not the swim trials. Swim trials are June. But there's a $300 to $500 a night hotel. They're trying to sell it. I don't know who's going to buy it, but it won't be a bunch of sports writers from around the Big Ten.
Move the thing to Vegas. I mean, man, the Big 12 has figured a few things out, and they've figured that out. I think they're in Vegas. I can't think they are.
They're in Vegas because the SEC's in Dallas.
Right.
They couldn't be in the shadow of the SEC.
Texas manages to reorient every league like right away. Why would they put that thing in Dallas? Make Texas come to you. Anyway.
They're trying to show the Big 12, we're in charge now. I mean, that's a statement. We are Texas. We're the SEC. We go wherever we want, and we're big wherever we go. We're big. We're bigger than you. So yeah, we own Texas now. That's a direct statement, and it worked. They chased them off to Vegas. We'll see how many media people show up at that deal. Well, you never know. But
the hotels in Vegas are slightly cheaper than $450.
Well, maybe the Big Ten should go to Vegas. We can go to Vegas and not spend $500 a night. We spend $500 a night at the tables and not at the hotel.
Good point.
I don't have $500 a night, by the way, but I just threw that out there.
Neither do I. All right, that is our Pick Six podcast for this week. For Tom and Evan, I'm Sam. We'll be back next week to talk about Nebraska men's basketball in the Big Ten tournament, and that'll be a kind of a fun deal. Football about 10 days away. I think you're going to hear from Matt Rule the beginning of the week of March 18th. Pro days on March 20th. Spring football starts on March 24th. So we will have some spring football content for you next week. Thanks, everybody.